Welcome back to the 7th Grade Mustache. On today's episode, we speaking of the books that change the brains, that change the game. There are a lot of books in my collection that I go back to and revisit many times because there's things in these books that have changed the way I look at things and allowed me to have a fresh perspective on a very old subject. And there's a couple books I have in mind, but one in particular is the Arancha book. This book is dense with knowledge. Dense. Incredibly, incredibly dense. This book, it's one of those things that either people know about it or they don't know about it. It's like there is no in between. Either you heard of it and you've read it or attempted to read this book. This book is a trip. It's a real game changer because it tackles things that are known by most people who have read the Bible or are familiar with the Bible, but it also talks about other religions in this book as well. What this book represents is a transmitted direct oration of the creation of the universe, the arrangement of the universe, and the events that occurred thereafter. I'm going to just read the table of contents. That sounds boring as shit, but no, it ain't. Not when it comes to this book. Not in this case. So, okay, part 1 is called the Central and Super Universes. And in this chapter, there is the Universal Father, the nature of God, the attributes of God, God's relation to the universe, God's relation to the individual, the Eternal Son, S-O-N, the Eternal Son, relation of the Eternal Son to the universe, the Infinite Spirit, relation of the Infinite Spirit to the universe, the Paradise Trinity, the eternal Isle of Paradise, the universe of universes, the sacred spheres of paradise, the central and divine universe, the 7 super universes, the 7 master spirits, dude, it just goes on and on and on. Hold on. I had to stop because there's a lot of parts to this. This first section has 195 chapters. Okay. This book weighs about 8 pounds. And that's the paperback version. Okay. So, but let's get into some really, really cool stuff. All right. Let's talk about some of the stuff that's in here. And for those of you seeking Jedi type knowledge, there's some of that sprinkled in here, but you got to really dig for it. And when they talk about the Melchizedek order, so the first time I heard about that, it's actually mentioned in the Bible, but I didn't hear about it by reading it in the Bible. The first time I heard about Melchizedek is when I read a book called Nothing in This Book is True, but It's the Way Things Are by Bob Frizzle. This book is a trip. That book is something else, but that's the first time I heard of the Melchizedek order. And then I found out that the Melchizedek order is a group of Jedis that existed before Jesus and taught Jesus. They are somewhat associated with the fathers of the desert, the Christian hermits. So in this book, on page number 1014, you have one of the first mentions of the Melchizedek order. And it says the Melchizedek teachings in the Orient. And then there's the Melchizedek teachings in the Levant. I mean, this stuff is a trip, dude. Like, this is heavy stuff. This is not for the meek. All right. So now what I'm going to talk about here is, as I flip the pages, I'm going past the table of contents. And I'm still, listen to that. I'm still flipping pages. Listen to that. That's still the table of contents. Do you understand? Listen, those are pages turning. That's still the table of contents. Now, you got to really focus to make it through this first paragraph. I'm only going to read part of it to you. Dig this. In the minds of the mortals of Arancha, that being the name of your world, exists great confusion respecting the meanings of such terms as God, divinity, deity. Well, this is the forward. You know what? Let me skip forward to let me skip past the forward. And I want to start with the first. I'm going to start with the first. Here we go. Yeah, we're going to start with the central and super universes. All right. This is some heavy shit. Listen to this. The universal Father is the God of all creation, the first source and the center of all things and beings. First, think of God as a character. First, think of God as a creator, then as a controller, and lastly, as an infinite upholder. The truth about the universal Father has begun to dawn upon mankind when the prophet said, "You, God, are alone. There is none beside you. You have created the heaven and the heavens, the heaven of the heavens, with all their hosts. You preserve and control them. By the sons of God were the universes made." Let's go back that up. Hold on. By the sons of God were the universes made. Interesting. I'm going to let y'all just think about that for a second. The Creator covers himself with the light as with a garment and stretches out the heavens as a curtain. Only the concept of the universal Father, one God in the place of many gods, enabled mortal man to comprehend the Father as divine creator and infinite controller. The myriads of planetary systems were all made to be eventually inhabited by many different beings of intelligent creatures, beings who could know God and receive the divine affection and love him in return. The universe of universes is the work of God and dwelling place of his diverse creatures. God created the heavens and formed the earth. He established the universes and created this world not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited. So this goes on and on and on to describe the universal Father. And then it goes beyond that. It talks about the names of God, and it speaks to the reality of God. And then further down the line, it talks about the formation of the universe. When you read about this, it ties together things that you've heard in science, things that were mentioned briefly at the very beginning of Genesis. All these things come together, but it goes beyond that. This is heavy, heavy stuff, and it's really good food for the brain because it causes you to ponder the known and the unknown together and how they interlock. And so this book, when I first bought this book years ago, I would see it on the bookstore shelves, but I would pass it up because I was, pursuing other stuff. And then finally, I bought the book and I sat down and I read it. And my takeaway is that this book will give you a clearer version, a clearer understanding of reality without bias. This book speaks to the nature of our existence in this universe without all the death and destruction and all this, that, and the third, and all the drama. It takes all that out and just gives you just the meat, no gristle. No, this is an investment in time. This really is not a read. That's a accurate assumption. Because this book is up to 2,100 pages, 2,097 pages. Yeah, 2,097 pages. So you're not going to read this in the afternoon. Even if you're a quick reader, you're not going to fly through this book. So let's go ahead and put that out there right now. This one is going to take some time because you have to stop and ponder these things. You really do.
Most of the books that, I shouldn't say, a lot of the books we talk about are going to refer to the Bible in some kind of way. And when you read this one, it makes the Bible make sense. Or like, this sounds terrible, like a couple of books that come to mind that changed me would be comic books. And I know that sounds corny as hell, but two of the books, one of them you love is that big book of conspiracies. Me and you got a hold of that book years ago. See? It's a thick paperback.
Break it down what that is.
It's in comic book form, but it's not a comic book. And when you actually break down and read everything, it's put out by Warner Brothers / DC, blah blah blah. But this book breaks down everything that you saw in X-Files, everything you read about in in Behold the Pale Horse, everything you read about the Bible, and all this Masonic stuff. It puts it all together. It gives you legitimate stories of this incident right here, this evil cabal right here, King Kennedy, all these killings. It breaks down so many different things. Talks about the Merovingians and this little chateau in France. It has a story about that. It has a story about a woman that worked for Kerr McGee or worked for one of these oil companies, and they ruined her life just to protect something. It has a story in there about like literally during Bill Clinton. The big thing with Bill Clinton, people forget, is that he did away kind of with the Secret Service and the black budgets and stuff like that. And people thought that was because we pretty much didn't need it, and we thought that we had world peace. No, that's not what it is. Come to find out, the CIA had sold this fake operating system. There was a real operating system to all these different governments that had a back door in it. So the shit that people are doing now, we did 30 years ago, 20 years ago. And so all these governments, I think Israel was the first one to realize what we had did to them and shit like that. It was like, it was a special form of Windows or something. This book has all these different things in it, and it gives these different stories and dates. It talks about different suicides that, well, how could this guy have blew his head off with a shotgun? But that's what this book does, and it talks about everything biblical. Another one that is in the same form, put out by the same company, I think it's called History of the World, book 1 and 2. And the person that you hear me talk about a history teacher that I had when I was in high school, but it wasn't my actual high school history teacher. He was in a program I was in called Upper Bound. Well, he hits me with this book. And he's like, look, I want you to read this. And he reads this whole part, and it talks about Moses and talks about all these different things. And he said Moses was in Egypt. And he said, well, he's the one who said it. Well, Moses was in Egypt, and he was passing for Egyptians. You do realize Egyptians were black. I'm like, no, Egyptians ain't black. I seen Cleopatra. I seen the movie. He's like, no, son. And then he hits me with the map, and he shows you do realize Egypt is in North Africa. You do. And all of a sudden, your mind is blown because he's like, look, why do you think they got this guy dark, drawing like this in this comic? Because they're telling you that if he was able to hide amongst these people, he had to be like them people. And then all of a sudden, he starts breaking down that the people in the Bible, majority of people in the Bible, were of color. They were black. They were African. All this, and so, again, when you hear us talk about these different books, many of them will refer to stuff in the Bible, and then it makes you go read the Bible. And as you get older, I get it. It's one thing when you're taught the Bible. You're like, hey, you taught about this. But another thing when you sit down and read something for yourself. And here's what blows your mind about the Bible, because, of course, the Bible's going to be one of the books. When you read it for yourself, you read the shit that nobody ever tells you about. And I'm going to give you a prime example. If you get a chance, check out Matthew 15:11. Now, this ain't the shit they always tell you to read, but here goes. What goes into someone's mouth does not defile them, but what comes out of their mouth is what defiles them. That's Jesus talk. What Jesus just said is not what you eat. He's telling you, I get it. You shouldn't eat pork. You shouldn't eat lobster and all this other shit. But that doesn't make you unholy. It's what comes out your mouth that makes you unholy. Is when you spit gossip, when you talk bad about people, when you make up shit, when you lie. That makes you unholy. That defiles your spirit. How come ain't nobody told you about this shit? That's Matthew 15:11. Check that shit out. So whenever we talk about these different books, they make you go read the Bible, and all of a sudden you're reading parts that no one ever taught you. When you go to Sunday school, when you go to church, when you're out in public, and people are spouting the Bible, the reason they don't spout these, because these Bible verses will make you elevate you. They will make you closer to God. They'll make you more divine. You'll treat your brother and sister differently. You won't be, oh no. They always want to talk about the Old Testament. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, finger for a butt fuck, all that shit. That's what they do. So
they want to get you caught up on the Jerry Springer type shit of the Bible.
Yes. These most of the books we're going to talk about are going to be liberating. Other books that I read that always influenced me are usually autobiographies. one of the saddest, of course, is going to be Richard Pryor, Prior Convictions. My ex, when I was in college, she bought that for me. I started reading it, and you can't finish without feeling like, makes you, I'm sorry, it's just, because he's so funny in so many things, you just expect the book to have a punchline, and the punchline is his life sucked. The stuff you knew, it actually gets worse. The one, Bernie Mac, You Don't Cry No More, that was another one. Chick I was dating got it for me, and she was like, you need to check this out. And I explained to her, I don't read well, so she went out and bought me the audio book. And this is before he got sick, long before he passed, so he's doing it. And there's so many, I shouldn't say parallels, because I hate when people, my life is like his. No, it wasn't like that. It's the fact that he had a shitty dad, he's who he is because of his mom, and that, wallowing in self-sympathy and self-pity is an excuse not to excel. And when you check these books out, I know people think I'm going to say the autobiography of Malcolm X, but I ain't going to say that, because you do realize, me and you grew up on Steve Coakley, and Steve Coakley said Alex Haley was a spook, and he worked for the CIA. He's the one that snitched on Malcolm. So I know a lot of people would think that that's where I would go. I can't read it because of that. I started reading it when I was younger, and when I found out that Alex Haley was a piece of shit spook, I never finished reading it. But Bernie Mac, again, been through a lot of shit. He never let his bad things define him in a negative way. He always learned from them. And self-pity is one of these things that when you read his autobiography, the first one, and that's the opposite of what society is today. Today, all it is self-pity. And, one of our last podcasts, we talked about everybody will self-diagnose. Everybody is like this mental health hypochondriac. And I've been through depression. I'll tell, like, hey, man, I'm flirting with depression. I got some shit going on, Ross. And you're like, what's up? And I'm like, my brother's my counselor and my therapist and everything else. But when you got a guy like Bernie who's telling you, don't wallow in self-pity, don't sit here and sulk on it. Like he said, yeah, you got to, sometimes you can't help but think about it and deal with it. But to sit there and just stay on that level and not excel, or sit there and stay and not meet the next challenge head on, or not get the job you need, or not go on stage, or not, write your material. And, oh, you got a kid already? Well, say, I got to provide for my kid, but I still have this desire and this ability to entertain. So I need to take care of my kid and do this. All these different things. And so it's inspirational, but it's one of these things that makes you like, okay, cool. Stop letting these failures define you and start like persevering, going through them, and that's how Bernie was. Prior, like I said, you start reading that, there's so many things, molesting, sexual, messed up done to him. Like, I don't know how he could find the ability to make people laugh, but I think that's how he stayed sane, is laughter. So those are some books right there. I know, I'm sorry for the whole comic book thing, but when you check out that big book of conspiracies, anybody, it's hard to find. I think I looked it up. It's on eBay right now for like $40.
But listen, it's worth more than that, because
yeah,
when I first bought that book, I knew that it was more than just some graphic novel, because what it did, it took all of the popular secret society agendas and it animated them. It illustrated them. And so you see, hold on a second. Hold on now. And you see like the magic bullet and the assassination of Kennedy and MK Ultra, and you start learning about all these different ones, but it does it in a way that's palatable for everybody to easily understand.
And what about the fact, how many times, the same way when we first read, like, Behold the Pale Horse, how many times have shit happened in the book? The book was written here, but then the shit happens later on, or you see a story.
Yeah, but the crazy part was, like, some of that shit was, like, happening real time in the 90s. That's the crazy part, because that's when everything was starting to ramp up, and I'm like, oh, this is spot on.
That's what I mean. I know, like I said, I'm sorry that I'm not a great reader like some other people, and it's like it hits. But that book right there is like, so many times I still refer to that book. I still own that book. That book has disappeared, and I had to go get it from people. Like, hey, bro.
Yeah, I need that now.
Don't
that shit over.
Beat your ass.
Right.
But When Roscoe talks real time, he's serious. That's how Behold a Pale Horse. We had a whole shows on it, so we don't talk about that book. But there's so many times when you read these books, and it's almost, I don't want to say it's unbelievable. Like, this is some bullshit. This is a joke because it's so far fetched that it can't be real. And then, like you said, a whole movie will come out about one chapter in that book, or a whole movie will come out. Merovingians, or something will come out where you're like, I read about that years ago in the Big Book of Conspiracies. Yeah, or like I said, or like I said, the history of the world. Exact same kind of book, same publisher, and everything. The cover's not quite as graphic, of course, but when you read that and you're like, oh, well, damn. Well, if that happened, then why do we do this?
But you got to understand the setting, because that book came out in the peak era of the X-Files. And that was when everybody was like trying to figure out what was going on. The truth is out there, UFOs. Then you had the Phoenix Lights that happened around the same time. And you have these crazy, massive UFO sightings by 20, 30,000 people seeing this thing in Arizona over Phoenix. And then you have the X-Files on TV, and you talk about Area 51, and Bob Lazar has been out for a couple years talking about he worked on UFOs. And then this book comes out, and it's the perfect time for it. And the book just knocks it out of the park because it does like a tongue-in-cheek approach, telling of these stories.
It says it's published in '95. I can't believe it, but yeah, I remember being college when I grabbed it, and I saw it, and I paid full price for it, whatever it was, like $28. And I started reading it, and I contacted you. I said,
it was $25. I remember. And
yeah,
the only place you can really get this thing was at Borders, because Barnes and Noble wouldn't carry it. Borders, or the comic book shop.
I got mine someplace else. I think it was during one of our travels. Remember, we would travel and we would do shit just like hook up. Like, hey, meet me here. And I think I grabbed it during one of the travels. It was like something else, and I grabbed it because of the cover, and I thought it was a joke. And then you start reading it, it's like you start calling people. There's stories in there like when you first read it, you can't read because they make you uneasy, like literally, like not scared, but it's like, are you serious? This is the top cabal of doom.
Yeah, yeah.
Paperclip. Yeah,
Operation Paperclip.
Yeah, it literally has these stories in there, and it's in a comic book form. It's animated like a comic book, and each story has a different animation and different drawing. So in each story, they're individual stories. And so.
But also understand that this is the time when the internet was a tiny little baby, and people would get these AOL CDs at the post office, or they'd be like in like these newspapers or the free, like Creative Loafing in Atlanta, and you would see these like CDs just all over the place at bus stops and train stations, and they'd be everywhere. And that's how some people got online, because they would use this AOL trial. So I brought that up to say that the internet was not as massive, and there was no social media. The social media was beepers and telephones. And so then the way this information spread was by the grapevine, and people just, talking about it, and like you just getting these ciphers, and like, back then, you'd be in a hip hop cipher, and this stuff would just come up, what I mean? Somebody would throw it in like in a freestyle talking about the Big Book Conspiracies or like Operation Paperclip. That's when, MCs were going all in on knowledge, but like in a funky way. It's the total 180 of the world we live in now. But anyway, this book would come up, and you'd be curious, like, yo, where can I get that? You got that? And if somebody had it, man, it was like show and tell in second grade. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, ooh, like, that's cool. You know what I'm saying?
You'd be talking for hours.
Hours.
It's not just that. Another thing is when enlightenment happens. I remember I had a homegirl, known her for years. We're real close. She's like my little sister, and she looked at that book, and then she read Behold a Pale Horse. She couldn't sleep for days. She was a sophomore in college.
Mm-hmm.
she's like, how'd you know about this? She's like, how do you not get upset? I'm like, dude, we read this in high school. my brother Russell hooked me up to this a long time ago. What you're going through, I already went through.
Yeah.
But and so another thing, when you talk about these books, you have to talk about the reaction of people, whether it's disbelief or enlightened moment. Because what happens, disbelief is cool, but then when something happens that they either see it, because like you got shows, we get a whole History Channel.
No, but look. Here's the thing though. On the East Coast and in the South, or if you on a HBCU having these conversations, there'd always be a familiar nearby. And it'd be some young black Mason or some shit like that, or some Order of the Eastern Star type of chick. And they would hear niggas talking about that shit. And this motherfucker it'd be like some Dick Tracy shit. She start talking into her fucking wrist and shit like, I got one of them. We've got one that can see, like fucking They Live and shit. Like, I got one that can see.
You know what? The only reason I disagree is because there's so many levels of that shit.
Nuh-uh. That's your experience. I'm telling you mine, nigga. Like,
oh no.
I be in places and like we be talking about it, and it be some dude, you know what I mean, looking. Okay, I'll describe the type. This motherfucker looks like he pledged Kappa. and you know what I'm saying, this motherfucker's all like extra clean and spiffy, and he don't get dirty. His fucking hands always got lotion on them, shit. You know what I mean? Like one of them dudes that fucking keep their fingernails all fucking manicured and shit. And he never engage in the conversation. He'd be on the periphery, ear hustling. You know what I'm saying?
Look, what stopped me from all that shit was Steve Coakley. The Steve Coakley video I gave you years ago that I can't find. I know where it is, blah, blah, blah. But because he was talking about Boule back then.
Mm-hmm.
And when he broke down Boule, we're talking about 94, 95. What makes 94, 95, 93, 94, 95 also special? Because if you pay attention, most of these books we talked about were published around that time. Most of this enlightenment. So when you had a brother like Coakley talk about Boule, I fought hard not to be Boule. You understand? Like I literally nah, man, that's not me. You got these Boule niggas in the middle of your clique. You got these familiars, as my brother just told you, that they want to run and tell somebody what you talking about. Like, well, who you gonna tell? Shit, we adults now. You can't tell my mama, nigga. Who you gonna tell?
Right.
Well, so I'm like off subject. Look, the reason we talk about how these books affect people and the reaction is because that's enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
When that shit hits you, when God smiles on you, when you look into the face of God, male, female, whatever, and you can't go back. And then that's why when these brothers right here find out the truth and they run and they want to go run to darkness, like the Matrix. Remember when old boy had took the pill or whatever, and he's like, you know what? I don't want to be a part of y'all. You got niggas that do that. You got niggas that they find out the truth, the struggle, the beauty of it, and like, you know what? I'd much rather get this money and a couple of white bitches and be cool. And you have people that run from knowledge, and so these books are things that I couldn't go backwards. You can't unsee this. You can't unlearn this. You can't stop. You can't. When you look at the sun, your days for a second. I can't go back to darkness. It's just not me.
So, another book that changed the game for me is a book titled "The Richest Man in Babylon" by George S. Clason. This book, it gave you the talk that you didn't get in school. You didn't really get too much from your parents. Some people might have. I didn't. And so the closest thing I got to the money talk was my dad telling me you can't have champagne taste of beer money, which is, in a nutshell, that's a mustard seed that has an orchard of knowledge and understanding in it. But beyond that, I came across this book called The Richest Man in Babylon. It's set in Babylon thousands of years ago. And it introduced very simple concepts into the power of money, conserving your wealth, and building your wealth. And so there was a phrase in this book on page 29 that just knocked it out the park. It says, a part of what you earn is yours to keep. So, young people have the tendency to spend a lot of the money that they make on flashy things in an attempt to impress people that don't give a shit about them. Or they want to have
They
the
want to feel
latest,
better. They want to feel
freshest
better, not be
gear,
better.
you know what I'm saying? Have some fresh kicks, fresh clothes, a nice car, da 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 da, all this bullshit. And this book speaks about the power of gold. And it introduces concepts how they have a cure, 7 cures for a lean purse. Shit like that. It teaches you how to how to reorganize your thinking around the money that you have. No matter how little you make, part of it you should put away towards savings or investment or both.
Real wealth, growing wealth, I should say, growing money.
Right. And so it speaks to the 5 laws of gold. And the first law of gold is gold cometh gladly and in increasing quantity to any man who will put by not less than 1/10 of his earnings to create an estate for his future and that of his family. So right there, it's telling you part of what you earn is yours to keep. That you should take a little bit, man, even if you're making something as small as $300 a month. I'm sorry, $300 a week. You should take at least $30 of that and put
For
that
yourself.
away for yourself. Just you got to. It takes discipline. It really does. It takes, because discipline is what you do when nobody's looking, and it takes you to realize that a lot of the things in your life are fleeting and temporary, and they won't last. And so you should focus on things to sustain yourself, but also that there are stages in your life that are temporary. There's this stage in our lives where we struggle, and it can be from the moment you leave home until you get your first house, or you get this job that lays the foundation, or you finally get the money to get your business started so that you can become financially independent and self-sufficient. So the second of the 5 laws of gold is number 2. Gold laboreth diligently and contentedly for the wise owner who finds for it profitable employment, multiplying even as the flocks of the field. So right there is speaking to investing some of that money into ventures that will see a bountiful return on that investment. Law number 3, gold clingeth to the protection of the cautious owner who invests it under the advice of men wise in handling. A billionaire from my hometown, Warren Buffett, said, never invest in things that you don't understand. So Bitcoin is big right now, and blockchain currency is just blowing up. There's new ones forming every day with blockchain currency, and then you have meme coins, which they just start off with like an idea or a rumor. So when you go and you invest in these things, don't invest any money that you really need. It needs to be disposable income. So say you have money,
The money you spend on entertainment.
the money you spend on entertainment and stuff that's not really important. So say for one weekend out of the month, you go eat at this restaurant. Well, for 2 months, cut that out, and then take that and invest that money into whatever it is you want to have a shot at. But study it first. Study that industry. Study the investment. Study how long it's going to take for you to see a return, and whether or not that risk will yield a bountiful reward. All right. So
The reason we're talking about these books is because black folks, we were taught to either save money or we spend money right away, because on things that are physical, because we don't understand the future is not promised to us. We don't trust banks. You know, we've been done wrong by banks. We've been done wrong by insurance companies. We've been done wrong by other black people, and of course, we've been done wrong by white folks in America. So you tend to not learn these lessons either because they're not taught or because you weren't ready for them. So when Roscoe tells you about these books, what he's saying is like, you know what, you have to build your wealth. It's not just given to you. Even if you just do 10 cents at a time, if your 10 cents grows to 20 cents, things like that. You know, I started buying mutual funds when we were in high school. You know, I would take $50 a month and put it in a mutual fund because my mom said I had to. She's like, hey, nah, you got to invest. We don't always learn those lessons like everybody else, or we don't have a culture of that. You dig? Like, you know, like Jews, not dissing nobody, but what I'm saying is you have a culture of, okay, you're buying a business, you invest in a business, you marry this person because of the money, you do this because of that. You're taught these lessons. We're in the black community, we tend to be victims of those lessons. Sorry, go ahead, man.
Number 4, gold slippeth away from the man who invests it in businesses or purposes with which he is not familiar, or which are not approved by those skilled in its keep. So if you're investing in something and the people in those industries see it as way too risky, people who've already had experience with this, who are around this every day, that should be a warning sign to not invest in it.
That's not a good investment.
Yeah. And number 5, gold flees the man who would force it to impossible earnings, or followeth the alluring advice of tricksters, schemers, or who trusts it to his own inexperience and romantic desires in investment. So avoid con men.
What about the 80s, and what about junk bonds and all that? That's talking about the 80s. Remember when people were diving off buildings because of the stock market? Either they were making all kinds of money or they were just losing everything all at once. That's that shit right there. Don't fuck with a fashionable investment.
Right. So, yeah. So basically, like, you know, there's a simple rules that they have in this book, and they say, start the purse to fattening, control thy expenditures, make thy gold multiply, guard thy treasures from loss, and make of thy dwelling a profitable investment. So there you go. I mean, but I see it all the time, though. I see people who complain about how they can't get ahead, but their habits betray them, betrays their progress. You know, I see a person that is been in an apartment for like 10 years and they haven't rented a house ever. I'm like, okay, if you want to keep renting, okay, that's on you, but at least rent a house so that you understand clearly how real estate works and how land works and the experience of being in a home. Because once you rent a home, you then want to own a home because you get tired of throwing that money away. But between the two, house or apartment, you're better off renting a house all day.
Look, one of the reasons you're better off renting a house or having a house, whatever you want to call it, the reason is just storage. If you want to start a business, if you have an idea, it is difficult to do in an apartment. Some of these ideas come out of New York or somebody, I don't know how they do it, because suppose you have a product, you want to store your product. Suppose you come across a vehicle, you come across something, like Roscoe will tell you, I go to auctions. And I was telling him, like, one time I bought a bunch of old microphones and old cameras for $40, and I sold them on eBay for $400. Literally, it took me maybe 3-4 weeks. So you need a place to store stuff. You need a place to sometimes just have solitude. Also.
You accumulate shit as you continue to live. But at the same time, you accumulate shit real fast if you start a business venture. And say, even if you're doing something as like Instagram entertainment, you still got to have a room or an area
Yeah,
where you got
yes,
to set up your chroma key screen and your cameras and your lights and your microphones, and
your green screen.
and then
Yes,
you have all of these noise factors from the rhinos who live upstairs or the deaf people who blast their music beneath you, and you got these bass waves that contaminate your recordings. So then you're wondering, like, okay, why am I in here trying to do this? I need to go over in the studio. Well, do you? Can you just rent a house and then have a entire room in the house where you can have a miniature studio? I mean, what we're saying is the more space you have, the better off you are in like how more
the more
how
options
more
you have.
conducive it is to growth. Space is conducive to growth. Nothing grows in a cramped space and continues to grow. It just doesn't work that way. And it's disharmonious to relationships also.
Look, sometimes you just need to get away from people. Sometimes if you got kids, you got a relationship, you got somebody coming over, whatever. Sometimes you need a decompression zone
Ugh.
from all the shit you're dealing with.
Sometimes you need decompress from the people you live with. And if your place is big enough, you can go out on the back porch and just chill.
Look, for the record, we're from the Midwest, so we're
We got
basically,
backyards,
yeah, we're cellar dwellers. You either got a backyard or you got a
but
basement to yourself.
we are basement kids. So
Yeah.
that basement, see, people underestimate the power of a basement
Being in the
because
earth.
yes, because when you're down in the ground, you're fortified. You are in a fortress.
You are safe.
Yes, but also storms can, like you say, to add what you just said, storms can come and go, and you can still be down in that basement just chilling, and everything is fine. And so I'm telling you,
On my
like
waterbed.
that's what exactly like which I got at 10 years old, paid for with money I earned myself. So yo, I'm telling you, basements are dope. You know, if you can get yourself a house with a basement, do it. Because you need to exploit that space and use it every square inch of it. But we're getting off topic here because, we were talking about The Richest
What
Man in
book changed
Babylon. And The Richest Man in Babylon is a deep book. I mean, it's not a long book. I think it has maybe 150 pages in it. It's small. But the information contained within is priceless. And it's really helped, to improve my outlook on money and help me to save money, help me to invest. I mean it really has changed things for me, so that's why I'm bringing this book up, because it's heavy duty stuff, man, and I think a lot of people could benefit from this type of book. So now there's another book, unless did you have another one you want to mention?
Nah. We said the Bible. I said 2 or 3 autobiographies. That's what. Yeah. Everything that I'm agreeing with you. Some of the books you're mentioning, I actually have read. I started reading. I can't finish books. My attention span is too short. But yeah, nah, I can't think of nothing unless you want to say something like, of course, they came from before Columbus.
Yes,
all those books. Ivan Van Sertima. Now, what was it? Oh God, I started reading those in high school. So yeah, those.
I got another one.
Impacted me.
So this book is called The 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. And yeah, man, this is another brain changer. So this book talks about how you give away your agency by putting too much emphasis on entertainment for all of the free time that you have in your life. And now that has transitioned to phones. So the screen used to be a large one that everybody would gather around, and now people just sit by themselves in front of a tiny screen. So the first argument for the elimination of TV is that TV conditions us to accept someone else's authority. So that right there just smacked me upside the head. I'm like, that's spot on, because, I mean,
Message.
right. But see, artificial environments deprive us of direct knowledge of nature.
Well, Oh, that's deep too. Hold it. But just the stuff we're going through right now, where you got MSNBC and you got CNN, Bannon, Fox, whatever conservative other network, and we put them as authorities. You know, and basically, this is something I see in the black community. What you just named something so deep that people love to say because we don't make our own movies like Harriet Tubman. Like because something's not in the movie, it's like it doesn't matter anymore. Like if there's no movie about it and there's no 3-hour movie, then all of a sudden that shit don't matter. Well, if he was important, he would have a movie. That right there, if she was important, that's some bullshit. And that's some that's
because it gives you artificial values.
Yes, and the authority you're submitting to the artificial authority. Deep. Come on, Roscoe, come with it. So the church say amen.
Technocrats expropriate knowledge and claim it as their restricted domain by controlling the content of that knowledge and the medium through which it is conveyed to us. This forces us to abdicate our own experience in favor of the opinion of the experts, self-declared though they may be. See, right there it talks about giving your power away. And how people, exactly, and how people just so willy-nilly give in. They give in and they just surrender their critical thinking. So that's what that first argument speaks of. So, all right. And it also, in that first argument, it mentions that there are 8 conditions for autocracy to flower. Number 1, eliminate personal knowledge. Number 2, eliminate points of comparison. 3, separate people from each other. 4, unify everyone's experience. Number 5, occupy the mind with distractions. Number 6, encourage drugs and conflict. Number 7, centralize knowledge and information. Number 8, redefine happiness and meaning.
Yeah, that's deep.
So, argument number 2, TV facilitates consolidated power through the colonization of experience. I'm going to read that again. TV facilitates consolidated power through the colonization of experience. Damn. That's heavy. So technological advances by their nature are controlled by those who control the previous technologies because it becomes grandfathered in. So, for example, if somebody starts a internet company where they're creating an app or they're creating some type of thing that becomes a buzzword in the homes and minds of everybody, they get bought out by larger corporations that are pre-existing, that have long money, that have been around. So, I'll repeat this again. Technologies advanced by their nature are controlled. Technological advances by their nature are controlled by those who control the previous technologies because of their existing power, position, and access. And this leads to consolidation and dominance in new fields.
In markets.
Instagram got bought out by Facebook. Twitter got bought by somebody, I think. I don't know, I might be wrong. But companies like this get bought up all the time. YouTube was bought by Google. And Google is run by a government company called Alphabet.
What makes it deep is that they're buying the authority. How many times have we saw? I remember being a kid. There's a commercial. We've been around for 100 years. This company had been around for 40 years, but they bought a company that was around for 40 years.
There it is.
And they bought it. And so you're buying the authority.
And you just believe it. You don't question whether or not that's true or not.
Yeah, I did when I was a kid because at the time 100 years was a long time. I'm like, damn, you mean to tell me they had chocolate chip cookies 100 years ago? Like that kind of shit. I'm stupid like that. And you would find out that they would purchase another company. That's these insurance companies. We've had your interest at heart for 45 years. No, they've been around for 20 years, but they acquired another company. Okay.
Argument number 3. TV physically conditions us for authoritative rule. Okay. Here are some phrases commonly used to describe watching TV. It's a hypnotizing, energy-sucking, brainwashing, vegetative, concentration-killing, addictive, zombie-like, mind-destroying, mind-numbing dream state that is a stupefying, cognition-killing, mesmerizing, colonizing, isolating, meditative, and yet somehow relaxing activity. And so we like it. So, yeah. Yeah, man. But, I mean, you've become conditioned to this, and you don't question any of these things.
Nope.
So, right.
Well, I think a prime example of when you look at what's commonplace, um, it's really frustrating because it took us forever to get black folks on TV.
Right.
Like you get one light skinned person or you get one dark skinned person. We met the quota. Now it's really crazy because we talk about images. We get talked about. It seems like every time you see some kind of new medicine for herpes or AIDS, it's some young black guy in there. Where the young white guys kissing each other? No, it's a young black guy. There's a young Hispanic guy in there. Because, so what they're doing is they're conditioning to you. Oh yeah, homosexuals are prevalent in the black community or this community. But what about the white homosexuals, the ones that actually run companies, the ones that actually make decisions? And nobody has a problem with gays, but I'm just saying the images. They're conditioning you to think this is okay, or this is that, or this is that. And it's not bad or anything. It's just the fact that how come when you have these talks with your daughter or with your kids or whatever, and I'm like, okay, baby, I get it, LBGT. But Colin Kaepernick lost his job for taking a knee. How many of these LBGT people are losing their job for being gay? They're not. The struggle ain't the same. Now, don't get me wrong. Back in the day, that was the issue. We grew up on Three's Company. They used to make fun. If you're gay, I'm sure there's some discrimination out there. But you have whole cultures, they colonize whole countries because you're black and take it from you. They don't colonize your whole country because you're homosexual, do they?
Check this out. TV is a sensory deprivation of a sort of type. A little different than the floating tank experiments. It leaves us open to suggestion, which is the foundation of hypnosis. No light is passive in its effect on us. Even natural light affects the body, clock, and our health. So the light from your phone will light up a dark room. And you'll be in this dark room and in this corner with this blue light on your face. It's always the same color temperature. It's 5,000 Kelvin. It's supposed to be the same color as midday sunlight on a sunny day.
Get drawn to it.
But it has an effect on you. And people don't realize it. They just, I'm just staring at this thing. It's like a video game. It's no big deal. It won't hurt me. Okay. Well, TV sends out, like your phone, only red, blue, and green light and allows the brain to interpret the other colors but does not receive them as it would with daylight. The limited spectrum produces all the deleterious effects we know about with red and blue light. So, there's a physical effect on you as well. And then the last is the fourth argument, the inherent biases of TV. The technology of TV predetermines the boundaries of its content. Some types of information can be conveyed completely, some partially, and some not at all. So the most effective TV messages are linear, gross, and simplified to fit the purposes of commercial controllers. You get sound bites. You get sound bites that's supposed to tell you a story, but you miss all the important details. Or the fact that the narrative changes. For example, when there's a spree shooter, the most accurate story is exactly what happens and what's reported within minutes. And then 30 minutes later, it changes. 2 hours, 4 hours, a half a day, a full day, 2 weeks, the story has changed. Now, one would say, it's because they didn't have all the information. No. You have to look at the information that you get unbiased from the very beginning because it's going to tell you what happened. How many of these spree shooters had men in black tactical gear showing up with bags of guns, and how the witnesses and the teachers at some of these schools that are being shot up claim they saw men in tactical gear shooting at people. And then after that, there was no speaking of it anymore.
Sandy Hook. What about the park? Sandy Hook, there were two shooters. There were two guys that got arrested with guns. They don't talk about that.
Right.
the whole thing, the narrative changes.
Narrative is always changing. And so that's what I'm saying is that when you get this information from your television or from your phone, focus
Filter is
on the
best.
first story that you hear. Because some of these first stories are going to have the most clear and unbiased information. So, again, this book was mega. And like the crazy part is that it's still relevant today. Everything they speak about, from the psychological to physiological effects of watching screens and
Television.
getting red, green, and blue light, the same thing is coming from your phone, just a smaller, scaled down version. How your point of view is colonized, how happiness and joy has been colonized, and it has to fit into an appropriate spectrum that is color safe and within the bounds and 1080p and 4K and all this bullshit, but it has to fit with the narrative. Because so long as that message is on point and it doesn't offend the sponsors, who are probably drug companies, then everything we can talk about is fine until we mention drug companies or we mention these government agencies or these things. And now it's okay to talk about UFOs. Now it's okay to mention them, but we'll just give them a different name. We'll call them UAPs. We won't call them UFOs anymore. Why? Because you have 80 years of evidence that you won't go into, that you want to completely sidestep that. Okay.
Or how about this? If you Google UFO and you Google UAB, what you going to get? They're controlling everything in the narrative. You know how you feel about it, and then you discuss this shit for hours. While you discuss it for shit for hours, they're voting on something important in Congress. It's a shell game.
Derision.
It's a shell game. Yes, derision on a huge level. Look, the reason these books are important is because they were enlightening. The reason the book that Russell just talked about is because we need to do an updated version and discuss how these effects are the same, or if these effects have been multiplied due to social media, due to television in your palm of your hand now, due to your smartphone, due to the fact that you got a screen in your car. They are controlling you with screens, and it seems so mundane and so what's the word I'm looking for? Harmless, but in fact they're controlling every aspect of your life, even your opinion about men, women, and children, everything. Gee willikers. Right.
So these books that I chose because, number one, I started to question like a lot of these things that I've been taught. And I've been taught to be a model citizen. I've been taught that, this is go along to get along and this is how you get ahead. Well, too late. Hip hop already ruined a lot of that stuff for me. And, and reading other books way before these three that I just mentioned opened my eyes way, a whole lot more. So, and especially the books that deal with African history and books like The Destruction of African Civilization from 2000 BC to 2000 AD by Chancellor Williams. That one will open your eyes. That's a terrific book. But these books I've been reading for quite some time. And I knew before it was, socially accepted that the piccolo player was a motherfucker, that we were being lied to as children, that, the fact that we're not hearing about these civil rights organizations, or we only hear about the acceptable ones and how the revolutionary ones have been demonized. So,
look, the fact that Martin Luther King has a holiday and Malcolm X doesn't, that's what we need.
That Malcolm X don't even have a street anywhere.
Oh, yeah, he does here.
Well, in New York, yeah. Well, I mean, okay, Omaha and New York, but I mean, I don't see anywhere else, though.
Nope, that should be in every...
But how long did it take for him to get that street in Omaha, though?
Oh, 30 years. We were in our 30s when that went down. Good Lord. Look, the point we're making is that you're letting someone else define you. And these books will liberate you and open your mind and make you recognize shit. And sometimes it does take somebody else's perspective. Other times it takes you to realize, like, okay, how about this? You don't need entertainment. You don't need a television in your face. You don't need that shit. That is a luxury. You need to focus on yourself, your life, your children, and your goals. Then, when you have some free time, actual free time, when you met all your other obligations, then enter into that. Instead, they make that an obligation. We're trying to wake you up to this shit. That's all.
Bingo. I mean, listen, entertainment is fine. I'm a
I
filmmaker.
love it.
I am a junkie of movies. And
Yes.
I be the first to tell you, like, I'll spend hours in a comic book shop. All right? I go to a bookstore, I'll spend hours in there. Entertainment is fine. It's fine. But make sure you do your homework before you go outside and play.
Play. That's the bottom line. Like, I couldn't even turn the TV on until my master's done. You know that.
Right. So, right. I mean,
I stayed in trouble.
right. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, look, we all have the urge to play because we work hard and we go hard to get this bread that we need to stay alive and get ahead. But people, let's move beyond survival. Let's thrive. Observe the 5 laws of gold. Part of what you earn is yours to keep. Read the Urantia book and learn about the creation of the universe and learn about the Jedis of the Bible and Melchizedek order. All right? But also get deep on the 4 arguments for the elimination of television, because it'll make you realize that not only is your TV, but your phone built to pacify you. It's a digital leash and a pacifier. That's all I got. We out. Peace.
Holla back.